Okay, good morning, everyone. I was looking out the window. Welcome to the special meeting of Dysart Council for February 12th at it is 9 a.m. And I will ask the clerk to do roll call, please. Thanks, Mallory.
All right, Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Donaldson's missing currently. Deputy Mayor Kennedy.
Present.
Councillor McKechnie.
Present.
Councillor Smith.
Present.
Councillor Wood Roberts is on her way, and Mayor Roberts.
Present.
Perfect.
Okay, so we do have quorum, although we're missing 2 councillors, so we will be able to continue. And the first thing I'm going to turn it over is to our treasurer, Barbara, to do a update on where we're at today. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask 2 things. I'm not on my game today. I need a motion to adopt the agenda for today. I'm so eager to get going. Moved by Councillor Smith, second by Deputy Mayor Kennedy. It resolved that the agenda for the special meeting of the Council of the Municipality of Dysart et al. Held on February 12th, 2021 be approved as presented. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And secondly, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, now we will move on and I'll turn it over to you, Barbara.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you can see my screen okay?
Again, thank you.
Okay, well, good morning and welcome to the third draft of the 2021 budget for Dysart et al. So we'll go through a little bit of an overview of the 2020 results, and then we'll just touch a bit on some of the initiatives within the roads budget, and a little bit of a review on asset management and how that ties into the roads budget. So currently we're looking at just over $500,000 surplus for 2020. And 3 key areas that contribute to the surplus is under protection, that being in our fire department. There was some savings on our wages and also with our OPP billing. We did have our reconciliation from 2018 and we did get a bit of a refund. The next segment is transportation, and we're looking at a surplus of $332,000. And so that's comprised of a deficit on the roads construction of $114,000 and a surplus on the maintenance side of just over $500,000. Under recreation and culture, a majority of the savings there is basically to do with the facilities operations under heat and hydro. So we're currently sitting at a working fund balance of just over $1.5 million at December 31st, prior to any adjustment for the 2020 year result. So we'll just move on to municipal taxation for the 2021 budget. Based on the previous budget discussions, we're looking at a 1.16% levy increase. So that equates to $3.41 on a residential assessment of $100,000. Some of the key items that contributed to the increase in the levy of $116,000 are the insurance renewal of $50,000. We did add some extra money to the brushing maintenance. And under parks and recreation, there are a few items that roll up to the $25,000. So next, I'm just going to provide a little bit of a refresher on asset management. I know today's meeting is going to be focusing on the Capital Roads project for 2021. And so with asset management, this is the legislated policy under Ontario Regulation 588-17. So staff here at Dysart have been working on updating the asset management plan. We're coming very close. We're hoping to have something by March, the end of March, to present to council. In the meantime, we have been utilizing the DOT software to assist with the information that will comprise part of the asset management plan. And so the DOT software will cover all different types of assets. So we're looking at our core assets being roads and bridges and wastewater. We will also be looking at facilities, fleet, and structures. So in conjunction with the asset management plan, we also have an asset management policy, and that's municipal policy number 56. So the purpose of this policy is to provide asset management program principles that enables a coordinated, cost-effective, and organizationally sustainable approach to managing capital assets. So we also have the strategic asset management policy, and that's municipal policy 57. And the purpose of this policy is to provide a framework for development and implementation of the asset management program. So this will also facilitate a logical and evidence-based decision-making for the management of municipal infrastructure assets. So here again, we have the DOT software where we have set certain parameters that get input into the software, and then that software will present the assets that need to be rehabilitated. So with that philosophy, we are relying on the asset management plan to provide the projects that will come forward on an annual basis. So kind of getting away from the worst first philosophy or complaint-driven approach. So putting it all together here is the asset management system. So we have the policy that sets the goals. We have the strategy that sets the framework. And now we have the actual system working together. So here today, we're talking about our capital budget for roads. We also have our maintenance for roads operations. And then there's the rehabilitation that we rely on the DOT software to help us make those decisions. That feeds into the asset management plan. So focusing on the roads construction, the capital projects, we're now sitting at $1,520,000 on the third draft of the budget. Currently, the municipal levy is funding just over $1.1 million of the 1.5. We're also drawing on the federal gas tax of $195,000, and that's the current contribution for 2021. We're also drawing on the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund of $159,000. And finally, we're drawing $20,000 from reserves, and that was specifically earmarked for the work on Klondike Road. So I just wanted to touch on some of the parameters of our government funding. And the one key grant is the federal gas tax. And so eligible projects focus around the core infrastructure assets. So that would be local roads and bridges, public transit, water, wastewater. Here at Dysart, we primarily have been channeling that grant money towards our roads capital construction projects. So at the 2020, at the end of 2020, the reserve balance for the federal gas tax is sitting at $286,000. So a majority of that money was the one-time top up back in 2019 that the federal government had committed to the municipality. So again, the current year allocation of $195,000 is over and above the $286,000 sitting in the reserve today. The other grant that we receive is the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. We have nothing carried over in the reserve. We have the 2021 allocation of $159,000 for our 2021 capital roads construction budget. So finally, and I'm not sure why the percentages aren't showing up here. However, this gold piece of the pie represents our roads construction budget in total, which is approximately $4.7 million, and that represents 34% of the total municipal budget. So that ends the presentation, and I will take any questions.
And thank you for that, Barbara. And it's on our slide deck. The percentages on that last slide are all there. So they don't know where they disappeared to because they came from you. But anyway, we do have that available. So just as an overall way to start our day, is there any questions on that? I do have one, but I'll hold off and see if there's other questions from other councillors. And I'm just going to make my grid a little bit bigger. Oh, thank you, Barbara. So I'll start with Councillor Clark.
Oh, yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that, Barbara. The DOT software, it became very apparent when I started working back through the just the number of roads and infrastructure items. I've got them Ward 2. I've got somewhere in the range of about 180 roads, and about a third of them are covered based on Rob's current strategy, not all in 2021, but over the course of the next couple of years. It became very apparent that to have any kind of a handle on and fair or equitable management of this, we need as much information as we can. The DOT software, when do you expect that to be fully loaded and up and running?
I do know that Rob has been working on that, and it's my understanding that all the roads are in the DOT system currently. And with the decisions that staff have received from council through the development of the DOT software, we're currently looking at an average network of 65%.
Okay, thank you.
When Rob will be joining the conversation shortly, and yes, we do have the DOT in there. So Councillor Smith, question?
Yeah, thanks very much. Barbara, appreciate the overview there, and just a couple of questions, clarification. The $50,000 that you've identified as part of the allocation of the increase levy, you called it brushing. Is that the kind of the 50,000 from our last budget meeting? We had some discussion. I had actually put forward a suggestion that we add $100,000 for ditching, and then there was a discussion and I think a kind of a consensus. Well, let's cut that back to 50,000 for now. You labeled it brushing as opposed to ditching. Is that clearly so?
So it was my interpretation it was for brushing, and it is the $50,000 that we initially had recommended. The $100,000 that you're looking at is not in the budget. We just put $50,000 in for now.
Okay.
John, Councillor Smith, sorry, pardon me. Why don't we, Rob is listening in on the call. And so seeing as these are some questions that he can answer, I believe it is brushing and ditching. Rob, if we want to bring him into the meeting, if you're ready, and we can just clarify that. Remember, we started at like 0.22%, and then the increase to get it to 1.16% was those three things in that slide deck.
Yep.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us. It's just a clarification on when the word says just brushing. Was it sort of brushing and ditching?
No, I had it included as brushing. So the total cost for brushing would be $135,000. We had 85 in the first draft, and then we added the 50,000 in draft 2.
Okay, so this is not going to address the ditching requirements.
No.
When I had put forward the 100,000, it was a result of your reporting to us that Canisius Lake Road, the bottom end of Canisius Lake Road, for 3 years in a row, you've been intending to use our own crews to get out there and get that ditched. And 3 years in a row, you haven't had enough time with our own crews to get at that. And Councillor McKechnie had a similar road. I think it was kind of number 2 in your priority list that he had raised, and that's where I had said, because you've assessed it, Canisius Lake Road in the report you gave us last budget meeting at about $50,000 for ditch. And I've forgotten which road it was that Councillor McKechnie was raising, but it was a similar amount. I put forward the 100,000, but we'll come back to maybe that in a minute. But Barbara, and maybe Rob can comment on this also. It's my recollection that in 2019, we sort of blew through our snow removal budget. As a result, in April or May of that year, Rob came to us and said, wow, we had a lot of excess snow, weekend work, blew through our snow removal budget. And so as an executive, his recommendation was, let's not do any brushing this year. There's $150,000 that's in our brushing budget for 2019. We can use that to cover the overrun on snow removal. And we didn't do any brushing in 2019. Is that my recollection? The numbers may be rounded, but is my recollection generally accurate?
I would have to go back and look at those. I don't have that information offhand.
Okay. Rob, do you recall that concept?
I recall the overrun on the winter maintenance. Got to be honest, I'm drawing a blank on how we funded it, but could very well have been from brushing.
All right. I'd appreciate if somebody would check that just to validate. I'm pretty sure my recollection is correct there, though. So I was curious, though, how in that scenario, we cut back on brushing rather, and created the backlog that Rob's going to address later. But now, when we want some additional dollars for brushing, rather than using some of the surplus we're carrying forward from 2020, $300,000 in transportation, we're putting all $300,000 into reserves, and we're asking the taxpayers to fund the extra $50,000 here as an increase to the levy. And it would seem to me, just as if we could do it one way in 2019, we ought to be able to do the reverse of that in 2020. And so I as I said, I appreciate confirmation of my recollection, and then we could have a conversation to say, why does all that money need to go back to reserves? Because I'm enthusiastic about the catching up on the brushing, but I'm particularly anxious that we have sufficient resources to get on with the ditching, because that's a prerequisite to putting hardtop on so many of these roads.
Okay, thank you.
And we have the ability to fund it. Is really the frustration here out of our surplus, as opposed to needing to further increase taxes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. So I understand. So I think I'm going to actually turn it back to Barbara and in terms of the reserves, and actually that was one of my questions from the outset is at the very beginning is the transfer to reserves. And but I do want to point out that we would never have been in a surplus if we didn't have safe restart funds. I think I mentioned that at the other two budget meetings, that we are very grateful for the province to do that. We'd be in a deficit for sure. So Barbara, if you just want to speak to the recommendation to transfer to reserves, as opposed to Councillor Smith's suggestion of bumping up and utilizing the opportunity of being underspent in certain areas. So maybe you can speak to that.
So, yeah, I mean, this year it's been, or 2020 has been quite a challenging year. And one of the challenges is getting some of the projects done, the whole organization. So for the roads maintenance, obviously, snow plowing was very much under budget, and that's more weather driven. And likewise, the sanding and the salting comes along with that. Obviously, with washouts, that again is very weather driven. It was a fairly easy spring of 2020. As far as the brushing goes, with COVID and going back to, I believe, July of 2020, when we did address the impacts of COVID on the municipal operations, the brushing was deferred because of, the uncertainty with COVID at that time. So in a nutshell, we've got $332,000 surplus within the roads budget, and that's combined with our overhead, our construction, and our maintenance. So with that surplus there, I'm recommending that we put some money aside for future events, with the ability to kind of streamline how we budget for snow plowing. How do we budget for washouts? They're very event driven, and we can have a peak year, where it could cost us an astronomical amount of money on washouts. So putting some of that money into the reserve will allow us to draw from that in a year, any given year, where there is a significant event.
Does that satisfy for now, Councillor Smith? I do. Deputy Mayor Kennedy will go after, but I'm just going to keep it with Councillor Smith for now to make sure that his question was sufficiently answered.
Thank you, and I understand Barbara's response, and and I'll happy to comment on it further later. But I have a different perspective. I'm fully supportive, particularly on the washouts. Yes, there can be more dynamics in that one, and having $75,000 to put into that and save it for the coming spring, whether it's 2021 or 2022, having a little extra there is a very helpful thing. But given our past approach, when we deferred brushing because of the excess cost for snow removal, I'd like to go the other way. With some of those funds, some of those surplus funds from 2020, in terms of utilizing those. When we finished 2020, Barbara reported that there was more than $1 million in tax revenue that was payable to us at the end of the year. So December 31st, taxpayers owed us just over $1 million taxes that would have been due a month earlier than that. And those people, obviously individuals or businesses, I don't know which they are, but probably some of each, are obviously experiencing tough times. And because they're paying us 1.25% per month on those late payments. So probably all of us involved in this conversation from time to time in the past have forgot to make a tax payment on time and incurred a penalty. But There are some people there that are experiencing really difficult times, that they've let their tax payments lapse by months and months. And so anything that we can do to reduce the increase that occurs in 2021 is going to be particularly helpful to those businesses and those individuals. And that's where we need to look very hard at a decision to increase reserves, because every additional dollar we put in reserves is a dollar that we need to collect from people. And some of those people, some of us would say, well, okay, it's a few bucks, but I can bear it. But to others, particularly those that are already behind in their taxes, it's really tough. And that's why I'm so sensitive about jacking up the reserves to too great a degree. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. I will turn it over to Deputy Mayor Kennedy for comment. Question.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts on the 300,000 as well, because I understand it contained in the current budget already. There's 120,000 set aside for reserve transfer for washout, snow plowing, and sanding, salting. Is that correct, Rob? That's still in there, or Barb, whatever.
For 2020?
For 2021, in what I have my notes here, washouts, snow plow, and sanding, there was 120 built into the roads budget for 2021 already. Is that?
So for washouts, we have 40,000 going into the reserve.
Yep. And the same 40,000 for snow plow and 40,000 for sanding. Now you want to put another 300,000, another 75,000 in each of those categories as well. I think that Rob's done an excellent job with his budget to start with, and I'm wondering if there isn't some way we could use a portion or all of that 300 surplus to deal with some issues here with gravel roads. Just put that out for further discussion.
Okay, so I'm trying to find the right words. So and hear what people are saying. Some reserves are going into general working funds, but some are going into specific categories such as washouts, etc. And it seems to be there's a desire to not transfer as much to those surpluses and transfer to reserves, and utilize that opportunity in a year to increase some work if we can get the work done. Some of it might need to be tendered out. We talked about that as well, if we added those things. So I believe I see a desire to not transfer as much into reserves. We've never really set a cap, a ceiling on where those reserves, and that's something that will be coming out, I'm sure, in our asset management plan of, this is a target. You should always have 150,000 in a reserve for washouts at a minimum, or something like that. We've never really looked at that. And so we've talked about that actually in different areas. What is the cap? I know even in planning, we talked about what's the cap for legal. Like, we don't need to keep adding to reserve. We may get 3 years in a row where we don't have something, and we may get 1 year. So what's the benchmark for an appropriate reserve for each of those funds? But I am seeing a desire to utilize some of that surplus for this to either reduce to from 1.16 to who knows what, or to keep it at 1.16 and add to more projects. So we'll get there. We will get there. Councillor Clark and Councillor McKechnie.
Yeah, just as a word of caution, I can see moving some monies over towards maintenance. I'm a little hesitant on apportioning it towards gravel top or brushing or ditching at this point. And the reason I'm saying that is what we saw in 2020 is a real shortage in terms of both materials and the resources to do projects. If we're going to end up paying 2 to 3 times the dollar value for the surface because we're competing against other townships or other brushing, we're not getting good value out of that dollar. We're only going to get about half the roads done for the same dollar, or for the same investment. So I think we've got to allow us a certain amount of flexibility to the roads department in terms of being able to call some shots where we're getting some value. I know people are getting pressured in terms of things like the ditching and the hard top, but it doesn't mean that we need to be paying a 50 or 75% premium, because we're in a competition. So I think we have to, as long as we apportion the dollars to the roads department, then they can call the shots based on what they can get done at a reasonable dollar. Thank you.
Good point, Councillor Clark. So what I'm going to do, Councillor McKechnie is next to speak, but I think Rob had his hand up, and I always like to let staff comment when it's fresh. So Rob, and then Councillor McKechnie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to go back to Councillor Smith's question about brushing in 2019. So I was just looking on my other screen here. So we did spend about $38,000 in brushing in 2019, and we deferred the rest because of the winter maintenance. So you were correct in that. But we did ensure that the roads that were being resurfaced in that given year were done. So it would have accounted for some of the backlog, but we did get some of it done. And just to comment on Councillor Clark's last comment there, I'll remind council that I do have a tender out right now for surface treatment that actually closes next week. So you will see those results at the end of the month. And, we're having good discussion here now, but I think we should keep in the back of our mind is let's wait and see what these numbers come in at, because we may come in under, which I'm hoping we are, but we may come in over. So I would caution that we commit funds to other roads when we may not be able to fund the roads that we've already committed to.
That is an excellent point. And I think what the main goal of what I'm hoping before we adjourn today's meeting is that we are able to set the levy and give a little bit of flexibility for all those things. But it is excellent discussion so far. So like Rob just pointed out, we don't know what the actual tenders are going to come in at. That doesn't mean that we can't pass or get where we're deciding on what the levy is going to be. Councillor McKechnie, you have the floor. Oh, sorry, Barbara. Barbara.
If I may, just to Rob's point as well. So I did go back in 2019, and there was $70,000 transferred to the reserve from the brushing budget.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Well, sorry, Councillor McKechnie, you have the floor.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said here in regard to not putting so much money in reserves. I think, needless to say, our brushing, ditching, resurfacing these gravel roads is a big topic. We spend a lot of time discussing this, and I understand with Rob how big the job is and coordinating all this. But I think it's really important that we address some of these roads and start fixing them, bringing them back, and just delaying it doesn't help as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for waiting as well. I think it's important when a councillor asks this question, even if I say another councillor can go next, it's really important if staff, when it's fresh, and that's why I kind of trying to jump around to letting staff answer the questions properly. So I'm just going to go back to the idea on the floor from Councillor Smith, which is not transferring. So, and I believe Deputy Mayor Kennedy is reducing the transfers to reserves and putting them into the budget for this year, as opposed to and how we get there, exactly what slot we put them in, whether it's brushing or ditching, or those things can be sort of movable, or is there a desire to do that? And does someone want, Councillor Wood Roberts, do you want to comment on that?
I just have a question for Barbara. Every year when we have the auditors come and go through our stuff, they give us some sort of percentage on how much we have, like an income debt ratio. Would not putting as much in reserves change that percentage for where we are in our financial health?
So if I'm understanding the question, are you referring to the annual debt repayment limit?
Yes.
FIR,
Yeah.
financial information reporting through the ministry? No, because that's based on the amount of debt you actually have versus revenues brought in. It's measured against revenues.
So the reserve balances have nothing to do with that ratio?
No.
Okay, thank you.
But our auditors do comment on our reserve balances, and there are target levels of percentages of a reserve balance to your overall financial profile as to, you know, depending on the size of the municipality, whatnot, that, you know, for instance, your working fund reserve, which is just basically your bank account, you should never let that dip below an amount. So we do have guidelines there through our auditors and whatnot, and we're not there, but certainly our reserves aren't all the way probably as high as they should be. Councillor Smith?
Well, yeah, you can always make an argument to, you know, fatten your reserves. You know, we all like to personally have a nice amount of money sitting in our bank account. But, you know, as I was pointing out earlier, I think we need to consider the implications of that for all of our taxpayers. As Barbara's presentation pointed out, even prior to any additional transfers, we had over $1.5 million sitting in our working fund reserve. That's about 15% of our tax revenue for the year. It's about 10% of our budget for the year. That's not a, you know, an inordinately small amount. There's not a high risk associated with that. And we're not talking about reducing that. What we're talking about is reducing the potential transfer, you know, to that or to our development reserve, which is an even larger amount. So, you know, as a starting point, I'd like to propose that instead of transferring $300,000, you know, $75,000 each across those four categories, we limit that transfer to $75,000. Put in the $75,000 for washouts, because I agree that that is something that's unpredictable, and when it arises, you have to deal with it. The implications from a brushing point of view, like why we would add to reserves associated with brushing, in that brushing is completely discretionary. We run into a problem some year down the road, just as we did in 2019, we can make a decision to do less brushing. And, you know, it's an annual contract. Rob pursued a different approach in 2020. Instead of paying somebody by the hour to do the job, he paid them basically for the distance. I've got X kilometers of roads I want to get done, and I'm going to pay so much for that price. He was pretty happy with the price he got, and I think when the work was done, he was pretty happy with the quality. He's probably going to pursue that approach again. It was a good move on his part. And so, as I say, that's completely discretionary. Snow and snow plowing and sand, it's always difficult to predict. But again, as we experienced in 2019, when we had a higher volume, we found a way to deal with it. In 2021 so far, if I look at what we've had in, you know, January and February, I think it's been pretty soft in terms of, you know, the amount. We haven't had a lot of weekends where we've had to pay overtime and incur extra costs. So at this point, you know, winter's not over and we don't know what's going to happen next November, December, but I kind of say, hey, we've got a good amount in the budget and we should feel safe in that. So I'd like to propose that we take the $225,000 that was proposed as transfers, you know, 75 each from brushing, snow plowing, and sanding, and keep those funds available for you know, either reducing the tax increase or you know, we'll talk later with Rob, I guess, about ditching and brushing and dealing with some of the backlog of getting the roads addressed, because as Councillor McKechnie points out, that's a high priority for our taxpayers. And so we'll learn more in a week as to how much it's going to cost us to do the 30 kilometers or portion thereof that we've already identified. But let's have some dollars available to do a little more, assuming we can get it done at a reasonable cost. You know, to Councillor Clark's point, yeah, we're not going to pay 75% extra because there's a shortage of supply in terms of resources. If Rob came and reported that that was happening, we'd be pulling back, because that would be foolish. But we have no indication right now that's going to be the case. So let's at least have the resources available to deliver what our taxpayers want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. So the Deputy Mayor Kennedy's next. So the suggestion on the floor is to, instead of transferring $300,000 to reserves, we would only transfer $75,000 to washouts, and the remainder $225,000 would be put into this year's budget. So, Deputy Mayor Kennedy.
I guess it's a two-part question now. So Councillor Smith, you're wanting to retain the 75,000 washout to go to reserves, plus the 40,000 that's already in Rob's budget for washouts. So that's 115,000 you're recommending to transfer. Is that correct?
Yes, I guess so. I was supportive of the idea of getting a little more availability because climate change is telling us that we're going to have more washouts, and we had a couple. I can recall the
Yeah,
one.
okay, that's fine. Then.
2019 was a
Thank you. I
big
just
deal.
wanted
Yeah.
to
Okay.
you want that included. The second part, then, I guess the question for Barb. I see that the capital project reserves are holding at 286,000. What are there any specific uses that those funds can be used for? We're using all of the gas tax money this year, but we have a $286,000 reserve there. What kind of restrictions are on those funds?
So I take it you're referring to the federal gas tax surplus there, the 286,000. So restrictions on that is for capital projects. So we cannot use that money for maintenance.
Okay.
And so within those capital projects there, it has to be money spent and paid to third-party vendors. We cannot capitalize on any of our internal resources, whether it's staff or our equipment. The other point to note is we have to spend that money within 5 years. That's part of the agreement. So it's relatively, typically we do spend the money year over year, but with the top up in 2019, we've just parked that money for now with the notion of allowing the asset management plan to come forward and see where we could spend that money on some of the projects through the asset management plan.
Thank you. Is that a possibility then to use those funds for third-party ditching and or brushing? Would that be a legitimate expense?
Maintenance, and that's not considered capital. It wouldn't be an eligible project.
Okay. That's what I was getting. Thanks.
Okay.
Is that all, Deputy Mayor Kennedy? Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kennedy raises a good point. In my mind, that 286,000, it's there. It's in the reserve for us. If, for example, Rob came back in to the council meeting in 2 weeks and said, okay, I got the tenders for the hardtop work that right now he's hoping to get done for $1.5 million, and those tenders came in a little higher, having that 286 available will give us the capability to make a decision. Okay, the low bid, the $1.6 million, that's okay, because we've got 286 tucked away here that can be used for that. And so I wasn't proposing that we allocate that right now. Obviously we want to use it before the 5 years are up, but it does give us the flexibility to make sure we can deliver what we want to commit to without running a deficit.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that's there for. It's a big unknown till next week when the tenders come back, and we'll receive them for our February 23rd regular council meeting, hopefully. Yeah. So I want to go back to Councillor Smith's recommendation and see if there's either a support for that, a different recommendation, putting nothing extra into those. So as I recapped already, it was to the 225 to come out. So the only reserve that he was proposing to transfer was to the washouts and to utilize that other funds. There's other options. So Deputy Mayor Kennedy.
Yeah, I'd support the 225, but I'd also take the 40,000 that's in the budget for snow plowing reserve and the 40,000 for sanding and salt and move that over. So it'd be I would like to see 305,000 if we took those two numbers and made available for whatever we're going to do here. So there'd be no tax impact.
So I'm going to throw out a suggestion, see if there's other comments on this. There was a reason why it was recommended to transfer to reserves. And so I do think that the idea to maybe not transfer as much to reserves, but I caution transferring nothing. And I wonder if staff have any concerns. We're the decision makers, but when you hear that we're not transferring anything, our little alarm bells going up and saying that's not a good idea. Again, keeping in mind, we don't know what the cap or what for instance, on a snow plowing reserve, what would be a cap? What would be a comfort level to know we've got that much in, so we don't need to put in anything this year in a reserve, or we have nothing in there. Like if next November and December and we have like a mega storm, we're up the creek. So if I could hear from staff without putting too much pressure on you, when you hear that we don't want to transfer anything, is there any alarm bells going off? Both Barbara and Rob. So Barbara first.
Yeah, so the recommendation coming from staff is with the notion of having some more consistency in the roads maintenance budget rather than having all these peaks and valleys. You know, one year you have a huge levy increase and the next year, you know, it's not as big. So we're just trying to streamline that there, and perhaps council may consider that we do have some money set aside for washouts, snow plowing, and set a cap on that. So we do have some reserves there to draw in the event of, you know, having an exceptional winter or an exceptional spring. I do recall, you know, we often hear about the 100-year storm. That is just a term. The reality is those 100-year storms are happening much quicker. And so when you're looking at a washout as an example, I recall the first one we experienced probably 5 years ago. That was upwards of $300,000. So just something for council to think about, at least to have a little bit in a reserve to mitigate some of those peaks.
Okay, so before Councillor Clark, Rob, if you could comment on, you know, putting nothing into reserve, or perhaps meeting at a midway point and not necessarily 75,000, but an amount. What's your comfort level?
No, and you raise a good point. Up to a couple or 3 years ago, we really didn't take into account putting into reserve for, you know, rainy day funds or snow plowing and sanding and that kind of thing. Something's better than nothing. I don't have the right answer right now as far as a cap. It's something we're gonna have to be comfortable with, whatever we do moving forward. But we can't be lulled into this false sense of security in the last year and a half where we've had it so good. It's gonna turn again, and we're gonna have some more years like 2019 and 2018. So in my mind, you know, given where we stand right now, there is an appetite for expanding some of the capital works. As long as I'd like to see something go in, just to keep that momentum going. I don't have the answer as to what it should be, but I'd like to see something go in.
Thank you. I mean, you know, we don't always have to agree with staff, and we do make the decisions. And I really, really respect the idea. The whole purpose of this is to try to get to the levy, as what Councillor Smith said at the beginning. You know, it's our job to make sure that the taxes that people pay are realistic and affordable. And these are tough times. So is there an opportunity to use those surpluses to offset the levy or add to construction costs and things this year? But we have to do it with caution too. We can't just say, oh, look, we didn't do some snow plowing was great this year, and then forget that some years it's not. So I'm a little bit hesitant to the zero of taking, just to keep the numbers right. I think we all agree that 75,000 is going to washouts. So let's just talk about the remaining other 375,000s, which add up to 225. I'm kind of more in the let's meet halfway in the middle. Councillor Clark is next, and then Kennedy.
Yeah, I agree. We've got to have something. We've got to, I think, have a little bit bigger buffer than the 75 or whatever. Jumping ahead a little bit, Rob had an item in here on the, I guess, the community safety or the speed limit, and in that he proposed we buy a piece of machinery to do that, but also back it up with an engineering student for the summer to assist him in the assessment. Buffer that we're talking about in terms of dealing with the roads, and if we do, and as was been spoken to, we've got some real weather events. We're very susceptible to weather events going forward. If we get a couple of major ones and we've got no buffer left, we're in trouble. So my concern, or I guess maybe my suggestion is, looking at us at trying to get us as much information as we can, so we're somewhat safe in how we're spending this money. We've got a fairly good database of detail, and so it's a combination of the software to enable us to manage the roads, being proactive on trying to catch up on the brushing and ditching, and as feasible to start being able to prioritize some of the hard top stuff we need to do. But we have to be smart in it. We have to know what our overall exposure is, where the soft points are, and try to estimate what kind of a reserve or what kind of a balance we need if we do get hit very badly. The brushing is a great thing. It's a very road safety thing, and it will also reduce some of our exposure with major events, as will some of the ditching. The least priority would be probably the hard top. Although I know it's a very emotional item for a lot of people who live on these roads. But in terms of exposure to weather, I think the hard top is the third item of concern. But again, we have to have a coordinated or an informed strategy going forward, and we need to be able to back it up with real data on what our overall road system is that we're maintaining. And I think Rob's strategy to develop a system for managing the priorities and for collecting data and assessing the risk is the best route. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, but I do want to separate the hardtop issue. We're going to just take that off the table because that's coming down the pipe sometime this morning. So this is just about building up reserves for maintenance that we never had. And I was here when we had 2 washouts on the same road, museum and then again right at on Bayshore, and those were astronomical hits. We had no cushion. And so even if you have a half a cushion, it's better than not. It does soften the blow, and it's the right thing to do, to be responsible, because these weather events we know are coming. And so I really just making sure that we have something in, maybe not as much as we've proposed here, but having something in. I'm going to lose track. I do see Rob and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to follow on your point, museum and Bayshore in particular, in the past, some of the washout budget has gone to increasing the capacity of the infrastructure. So it's not just putting the road back in place, it's buying new culverts, larger culverts, doing that kind of thing. So we are softening the blow as we move forward. It's just we don't know how many other culverts are going to fail to that extent.
Yeah, but those were just out of the blue, and 6 weeks or 2 months of traffic being diverted, and like I say, we didn't have the money in reserve. So I'm just trying to learn from experience and build up some reserve. Maybe 75 is too high this year. Let's use that opportunity. Deputy Mayor Kennedy, go ahead.
Just to refresh my memory, we're already putting 100,000 in reserves in the infrastructure. Is that's something new with we just recently started? Is that correct? Yeah. So now we're putting 420 in this year, okay, or more. On top of that is what's being proposed right now. We started doing the 100,000 a year because we didn't have anything, as Mayor Roberts has said. So we felt that 100,000 going in each year would help. So now what you're proposed right now, what we're discussing is another 420,000, 300 plus of the surplus plus the 120 you have in the budget. So I think there's room to move. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, although this is all the maintenance, not the other was capital. Councillor Smith?
Roberts, I appreciate your perspective in terms of the experience you've encountered over past years in terms of these things catching by surprise. And as Rob pointed out, we have replaced those with larger culverts, so the risk down the road has been reduced in each of those cases. Adding 75,000 to to the washouts reserve, plus what's already been budgeted for, is a pretty significant amount. And, you know, I'd also point out that, as Barbara regularly reminds us, we have a lot more borrowing capacity than we're utilizing right now. I'm not recommending borrowing just to get by, but if one of those 100-year storms hits us, and we've got a crisis, we have the wherewithal to deal with it. The problem with these reserves is that we're taking money from our taxpayers to put it in our bank account, where we're going to earn between 1% and 2% on that money. And taking it out of the hands of taxpayers, who, some of whom need it, evidenced by the fact that they can't pay their tax bill as it is, and others who would say, gee, if I had that money in my pocket, I'd do better than earning 1% or 2% on it. Or I'd like to spend it. I'd like to enjoy my life. And it's that kind of trade-off. And that's where I think that, yep, washouts I worry about. And so I want to put the 75 in there, but the other 225, at least, let's keep that available here to address some of our needs, including holding the line on a tax income.
Okay, I'm wondering, because this is great conversation. However, we have other issues. So I'm wondering if either we have support right now, or we could hold that thought and collaborate it into, because it is part of a resolution that I'll read later. Deputy Mayor Kennedy, you have a suggestion or comment?
Yeah, I just wonder if we just park that 225 and come back to it at the end of the morning, or the end of the meeting. It's just, and then that way we'll have a better understanding of where we're going to be at the end, and go from there. I think you're heading in that direction.
That was what I was saying, is why don't we just not make an actual decision on that and just hold that thought? There's a resolution, which I won't read now over that, because as we go along this morning, some things might change. And also, there was one thing, Deputy Mayor Kennedy, that you mentioned something else besides the 375s that we see here. What was the other reference that you had in?
On the 286 capital project reserve, is that the?
No, there was something 40,000 and something or other.
Oh, the 40,000 for snow plow and 40,000 for sanding salt, that new reserves being created.
Oh, that we were already putting in. Okay.
That was in the, yeah.
Okay, so we'll just park the 225 for now. There might be some compromise, or it might be all the 225 does not go to surplus and it goes into this year. So is that okay if we just park that, and we'll probably end up reading all the resolutions at the end of the meeting as we start to consolidate today's conversations. And so where are we at really, Barbara? So that was revenue and expenditure report, which I won't read that resolution, I think. And the next one we won't, I think the state of roadside brushing, and then gravel road to hardtop, we'll do sort of those together. Like I say, if that's okay with the council, we'll end up kind of at the end of the day, hopefully with consensus, and then the resolutions will be all read at the same time, as opposed to the way I would read, we've dealt with that and we move on. So Rob, I'm gonna let you talk through the state of roadside brushing. Dicer.
Yes, thank you. So obviously we've been talking about brushing quite a bit in the last couple months. So what I've done is, we do have a level of service, which is policy number 49. And in that it has timelines and thresholds for our brushing. So as brushing came up and it was being talked about more and more, our staff went out and did a dashboard assessment of our network. And what they found is apparently approximately 101 kilometers right now requires brushing. So on a 10-year program, we need to brush approximately 29 kilometers. Our current funding does support a 10-year program, but it does not deal with backlog. So with the addition of the $50,000, should it stay in the budget, actually exceeds the 10-year brushing cycle with the addressing the backlog, and nears the 7-year cycle. So given that asset management is playing such a large role, it's coming down the pipe. And as mentioned, it's a discretionary topic to some degree. Once it hits the edge of lane, basically we have a timeline. We do have to deal with it. What we haven't dealt with, certainly in my time here, is how often do we want to get around this network? Is it 10 years? Is it 7? Is it 5? The problem we have is I've been here for 10 years now. I've brushed West Shore twice. So, and it's given the terrain, it's given the type of vegetation. So maybe the answer isn't we're going to get around the network every 10 years, but we're going to identify hotspots as we go along and realize that the West Shores, maybe they have to be done every 3 to 4. There's some roads that haven't been done in probably 20 that are fine. It depends on the makeup of the terrain. So what I'm getting at is we have $135,000 as it stands in the draft budget. It will almost accomplish a 7-year cycle while addressing the backlog over those 7 years. So given that we're talking about putting into reserves, taking out of reserves, I'd like to gauge council's comfort level with what we have funded this year for brushing, and is it sustainable in years moving ahead?
Excellent conversation. So he would like to hear from each councillor. So I'm going to turn to some of the ones that have been a little quieter today. If you guys want to comment on Rob's proposal of a brushing plan. Councillor Wood-Roberts, Councillor Wood-Roberts, go ahead.
I don't have very much that needs to be done in the village proper at all, just some of the corners and stuff, which he certainly gets our guys to do, and they do a great job. So I don't drive a lot of the outlying roads to a great extent, but I'm just, happy that he wants to move this plan forward just to make it safer, basically.
So that goes to the sort of as needed hotspots. The town is maintained fairly regularly. Councillor Robinson, did you want to comment?
I just know from around town. Rob, do you have any say in what comes down in the brushing? Just because I'm just going to take the road in town, around the block. There's trees that get brushed every, I don't know what their cycle is on, because they come down and touch the cars, but why not just take the whole tree out? And that would solve a problem for many years rather than having to come back and brush it because the branches are out again on it. Do you have any say in what comes down on the brushing?
Yeah, but once you get into tree removal, once you get over, I don't know, depending on the species, 6 to 8 inches, the mechanical brusher won't take it down. So you are into hiring somebody else to do handwork. Our guys are not qualified or trained in felling trees. So that would be another cost we'd have to do on top of. So we do try and stay away from taking trees down if we can. If they're in the proximity of hydro lines, we absolutely don't go near them. We would talk to hydro on that and they may or may not take it. Sometimes if they're going to fall away from the road, we would just let them fall. If they become an issue, then yes, we would take the whole tree. But having not seen the trees you're referencing, I really don't have a solid answer on that one.
Okay, all right. I am definitely for the brushing, and because especially where, and like Nancy said, where the line of sight on corners is hindered because of the brush there. So I would definitely opt for the 7-year rather than the 10-year, because in 7 years you can get over 20 feet high on some vegetation. So I definitely in for the 7 years. And also I also like that, yes, some parts of the roads, they don't need it at all and others need it more because of the growth or the length of growth. So I'm good for, I'm definitely in for the brushing and definitely for 7 years.
Oh, great. Thank you for that, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I agree. I think a targeted strategy, as Rob has put forward, some areas needing more frequent than others. And it's not just the corners. We have some roads with some twists and turns, a lot of people walking in. It's a safety issue. But as Rob has identified, there's only some areas that need that. So a targeted strategy with a bit of a bump over the next year or two to catch up on the backlog would be perfect. Thank you.
Great. So that was pretty easy. Councillor Smith?
I just want to echo that. To me, brushing matters, but And I'm more into the, I think what Rob called ad hoc, because I think he's quite right. I'll just use some local red roads here. Like a Green Lake Road, there's almost nothing you're ever going to have to brush. That's just the nature of the way that road is developed. But West Shore, it's a fairly high speed road. There's a lot of curves, and so it needs to be brushed twice in 10 years. That's appropriate. Some of the side roads off West Shore, I would say, less so. I'd be less concerned about them. They're lower traffic roads, and people are driving more slowly. Pedestrian can walk on the road because there's a little traffic and not be that concerned. Because again, when there is our cars, it's they're at slower speeds. So a regular schedule is not the right answer, but it's your crews through their inspection kind of saying, wow, yeah, we need to get at this one. And by having a budget of $130,000 to $150,000 a year for it, that's going to give you the capability to address your needs and still have the the discretion to say, as you've done some years, say we'll use a little less this year because we've got some pressure on snow plowing, for example, as occurred in 2019. And I think that's something that that ought to be the way we look at brushing.
Great. Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, and to go back what you had said a while back now, Councillor Smith, is we now tender the work generally by the kilometer of road. So as you said, the Green Lake Road, that wouldn't be a good idea to tender by the kilometer because they're going to make very good money on it. So at some point when we get ahead of this backlog, the 101 kilometers or so, we may want to consider going back to an hourly rate, but we're a long ways from that.
Yeah, good points. Councillor McKechnie, how are you feeling on maintaining that level?
Yeah, needless to say, brushing is a big issue because it's preparation for when we are going to resurface. If I remember Rob telling us over the last year or so, you got to brush it, you got to ditch it before you resurface it. So I think it's really important that we hit the hot spots, the really, really bad corners, but preparation for resurfacing, like Rob says, if you brush and then you don't resurface that part of the road in 3 years, you might have to brush it again. So I just think that it's really important that there's a schedule set up. And I'm sure Rob's very aware of that when you have such a large number of roads to look after. But the hot spots are, to me, we should be out there and taking care of them because there is so many people on the roads walking, biking, everything else. So the 7 years, fine with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Walt. Yes, and safety seems to be a concern for everybody. And whether we say 7 years or ad hoc, sort of more the 7 years is the farthest out. But as Rob pointed out, West Shore might be every 5 still to continue. Rob, go ahead.
And the caveat to that, we want to brush it out to make it a little more appeasing for people to use the roads as walkways and that kind of thing. But it's been our observation when you brush the roads out, it tends to speed up traffic, depending where you are. I don't need to tell you, Councillor Smith, about West Shore. I'm sure that the brush at the edge of the road doesn't slow them down a whole lot, but I know it speeds them up when you clear it back. So.
It's such a nice road. Okay, so I think we have consensus on that one, which we will move on. Again, I'm going to just do all the resolutions later, so Mallory, don't worry, I know that they're in there. So the next conversation is the gravel road to hardtop road considerations. And I just want that this could be a more detailed conversation. We'll keep our eye on the time to take an appropriate break. So if the conversation goes longer, I would like to take a break by 10:30, quick recess. So keep in mind what Rob said, that the tenders aren't in yet, and naming certain roads and pulling road X and committing to that before we have the tenders out might be a bit premature, but I'm going to let Rob speak to what he's got here. And we are looking at today's meeting as a sort of holistic approach where we've parked that first suggestion of bringing forward reserves. So with that preamble, I will turn it over to you, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, absolutely. I think it would be in our best interest to wait to see how these tenders come in before we really make any hard and fast decisions. It's worthwhile to have the conversation now. The reason I presented this the way I did was there always seems to be a handful of roads coming up. And I just wanted council to be aware that we do have quite an extensive network of gravel roads, over 100 kilometers. Over 37 of that was hardtop at one time. So I think it all has to be part of the same conversation. There's absolutely, I'm a believer in gravel roads. I think they have their place, but I also understand that some roads do require hardtop to save maintenance costs. There were no recommendations in this. This was solely for council's information, and it's just something you're going to have to bat around and just figure out where we want to go with this in the short, mid, and long term, really. There are risks to resurfacing everything in 1 year. We've seen that in the past, but if we want to get proactive and take a handful of roads, I'm okay with that as well. But I wanted council to be very clear and have it clear in their minds, just really how extensive the network was and how many other roads were previously surface treated besides the ones that were talked about.
Thank you, Rob. And I think, John, Councillor Smith, I'll go to you first, but we have to keep in mind, and we've said this before, that we're trying to take the politics out of this and the complaints or whichever. We're trying to deal with this as a whole Dysart network. And if it meets this certain criteria, then it will come forward. And a good example of that is, and we have said very clearly, given direction, except maybe not through resolution, that that if it meets certain criteria, we want to consider and putting it into the plan over so many years. And I believe, just to confirm before I take questions and comments from other councillors, in the second draft, which we already passed, that recommendation was Bitter Lake Road not in the 2022 2.8 kilometers to be resurfaced. That was in our last budget meeting.
Yeah.
So don't forget, we already have committed to that one in 2022. And I don't remember the cost. I just remember it was 2.8 kilometers. And I believe that's in the 2022, when we took out some roads out of town and rejigged some things. So we are considering returning some roads that were hard topped, if you will, or had a surface treatment, to returning those because if it meets a certain criteria. So now I'll open it up to the floor for, I see Councillor Smith is first, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And Mayor Roberts, you've covered some of that from an overview. That, I mean, council established a direction and gave direction, I thought, on this topic in terms of gravel roads to hardtop a couple of months back, where we said that roads that had an average daily traffic of over 100 that had been gravel, had been hardtop in the past and converted to gravel, that we were anxious to get those back to a hardtop surface. And Rob sent out, prior to our last budget meeting, a list of about 15 roads, some of which have an average daily traffic of in excess of 100, and some were less than that. But there were several at the top of that list: Neches Lake Road, Redkin, Irish Line, Bitter Lake Road, Winona Lake, Halsley Pass, a couple of others, Ross Gardner roads, for example. These were roads that had daily traffic of over 100 vehicles. And he gave us the ditching costs, estimate of the surface treatment. And those roads on that list aren't part right now of the 2021. I had picked, I'd focused on the ditching cost because we're not getting to that. And I used Neches Lake Road, I mentioned earlier this morning. But there was another one there, Redkin, on that list. There's almost no ditching required based on this $10,000 estimate, and my familiarity with that road kind of say, gee, why don't we get at that one here in 2021, make some progress against this set of priorities that we established. And also, and this is why we had this discussion about how much goes to reserves, I want Rob to have dollars available for ditching in 2021, where he can hire a third party and address some of that backlog, which Neches Lake Road was at the top of his list. Councillor McKechnie had one, I think, that Rob had said was number 2 on his list. But, it's $50,000. Irish Line, It's a road that's in terrible shape. High daily traffic. It's not in 2021 or 2022 right now. It needs $70,000, according to this report that Rob gave us last month, in ditching work. It's a road that's going to require some work in terms of getting the road surface above the flood areas that are around it, because that road's underwater each spring. And so we've got to give them some dollars for ditching to prepare these roads for that hardtop. And so to me, that's a priority. And again, I picked Redkin as one that it ought to be easy to do because there's so little ditching. We could get that done in 2021, get the hardtop on it, using some of those dollars that are surplus from the 2020 year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. What I'm wondering with the recommendation that Rob said to sort of hold off on actually maybe naming any particular roads to wait to see where our tenders are at. If we looked at it another way and just put, and I believe we did this in another budget. I can't remember if it was last year or the first year that we just put an amount. We didn't actually name the roads. We waited till the tenders came in. And then, for instance, if the tenders come in an amount, plus we've increased to the capital amount being able to, that Rob can now spend on those roads, we sort of match them to where those projects would fit in if we want to bring them ahead of what is proposed right now. Does that make sense? As opposed to saying, yeah, let's do Redkin this year. Let's wait and see what the tenders say. And Redkin may be an absolute one that we can bring ahead. Sort of a bit of a, what do they call that? Chicken and egg, which comes first, and wait to see what the tenders are, as opposed to actually naming the roads today. We just make sure that we pass the levy today with an amount. I did see another hand, Deputy Mayor Kennedy, and then Councillor McKechnie.
I think that's a smart way to move forward. I think we all want to minimize the impact to our taxpayers, but we also need to give Rob some direction. So if we come up with a dollar value that we just set in abeyance until we find out what the tenders are, maybe you can get an idea on the brushing tenders as well, maybe able to advance some things there, and then come back and just finalize or let Rob give us some priorities on what he wants to do. My understanding is if you can ditch a year ahead of time, it allows the road to settle as well. Is that correct, Rob? So it gives the road time to recover before you do put a hard top on it.
Yeah,
So
not so much the ditching,
the
but culvert work.
priorities.
Yeah, the culvert work for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Councillor McKechnie, yeah, good points. Councillor McKechnie, go ahead.
Yes. I know that there's councillors that are tired of me talking about my roads, but I feel that I have to speak for my constituents, and Dunn and Klondike has been on the radar for a long time. And I know you don't want to talk about roads, Mayor, but I must say this, and also Redkin. They're not big jobs like we're going to be doing Sullivan this spring. I don't know. In my perfect world, we just continue on down past Sullivan to Dunn. It's right there. And but somehow we've got to get these roads that people have been waiting a long time for fixed. They're not big, huge, like 10 kilometers. Some of them are only 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers. And I really think we should put them in a priority list. These roads have been a long time the way they have. We've been promising it or saying that we're going to get it done, and it doesn't seem to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And it's not that I don't want to talk about roads. I just think we have named in the first, well, let's call it the second draft budget. We have named roads. Those have gone out for tender. We're getting those tenders back. Now we're going to add some more, and I think it would be prudent, particularly if we're it'd be prudent to wait to see what those tenders come in at for resurfacing. And I also think somehow then through resolution, we need to have a priority. Oh, somebody's, I think your mic is still on if you want to mute or well.
Yeah, I'd like to just say something else.
Okay. I'll just finish there for 1 second, which is, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, go ahead. I lost my train of thought there. You have to unmute now, Councillor McKechnie.
I'm sorry. The with the process we've got, where we're, figuring out what roads are going to be resurfaced, Dunn and Klondike and Redken, they may never fall into that category for another 2 years or 5 years.
So actually, my train of thought came back, which was that we do and have not set by resolution. And I think that's the only way we're going to give guidance to staff and to ourselves, that we stick with the plan. We did it verbally, but we do not have anything to say. We sort of set a target of 100 daily traffic counts. So actually, Klondike and Dunn would not fall into those, but Redken would. And so I see Rob's hand shot up. So that's anyway, go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just going to throw this out there. Is it something, let's get through this year, however it pans out, and we bring that back in this spring and we can discuss our different classes of roads and how we're going to prioritize each class of road?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. And so that would be great. And then if we already have that extra money, that's when we can actually name some roads that could be, if the tenders come in, either on or under, that we could include some of those roads this year if those companies are able to do it. As well, we have clear path as to what we're doing on a go forward basis. Rob?
Yeah, and just to maybe throw a wrench into this a little bit, Council, we haven't even had the discussion yet on the very, very, very low volume surface treated roads and if we're going to keep them surface treated. So we have a much bigger conversation coming up. So, the gravel roads is one thing, but we still have to discuss the surface treated roads too.
Absolutely. Good point. So I think we can hold those till we get out of the budget process. Right now, today, the goal is to come up with direction to Barbara so that she can bring a bylaw forward that has the percent of the levy increase. That is the ultimate goal. And then within that, give some flexibility, particularly in our transportation budget, so that we can, it looks like we want to add some more. We want to give you more money, Rob, and we don't want to borrow. We want to use our surplus somehow, some way. So I think I feel like we're getting fairly close. Is there any further discussion that we need to have on this report now? Or I think that we would like a fulsome report sometime in the spring or by June or when it's sort of off, and talk about the level of the what do you call it, requirement for where we would resurface a gravel road to hardtop, and where we would actually, where a road is hardtop, once it falls apart, it goes back to gravel. Like if it has a daily traffic count of 8, which we have some roads. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So conceptually, I have no problem with the direction you want to go here in terms of not necessarily nailing any of these down today. I'm going to make a proposal. I know you're going to want to take a break in a few minutes, so maybe people can think about this while they're on the break. First off, I don't want to wait until June to decide how we're going to allocate whatever additional funding we give to Rob. I want to make those decisions early enough so he can put those funds to use during the summer of 2021, and deciding in June would be too late. As a concept, we had a proposal coming in today with municipal levy increase of 1.16. So let's leave it at 1.16 for a second. Let's take the 225 that was going to be allocated to reserves and make that available for road work in 2021. That road work could be ditching in preparation for future hard topping, or it could be hard topping and by adding a stretch or two of some of the roads that are on this list that Rob could get to. Deputy Mayor Kennedy was wondering about an additional 40,000 that was already there. I'd sure be prepared to talk about that, but we're talking about something in the area of $250,000 additional road dollars being given to Rob to spend on, whether you consider ditching, if we hire a third party, because Rob's not going to get to himself. I know we call that capital, if we call it operating, but it's dollars are available for work in 2021. Could be third party doing some hard topping, but there's $250,000 there, and we can do that and still have a levy increase of only 1.16. To me, that's an attractive outcome for taxpayers in terms of the dollars they have to reach into their pocket for. It's an attractive outcome for those of us who believe that roads deserve more spending. So I just put that out as something to be a proposal for people to react to and potentially think about while we take a little break. Thank you.
Hey, does anyone want to add to that, or we can take a 15-minute quick coffee break? Deputy Mayor Kennedy, go ahead.
Yeah, I concur. I just make it a firm. Let's make it 250. They figure out where they get it out of their reserve transfers. So that's a hard number, and that we keep the 286 federal gas tax money in reserve in the back or something else that comes up, but not to consider it as part of Rob's initial extra funding right now, but that is available.
Okay, so 225 from those other reserves, but 25 from the something else for a total of 250. Okay, so everyone's going to ponder that while we will take a 15-minute break, and we will come back at 10:40, and we will continue the conversation. So turn your video off if you don't mind, and you're all muted, and we'll see you at 10:40. Thank you. Okay, and we are back in session now after a little coffee break. And so I think what I'm going to ask, where's Rob? There he is on my screen. I'm going to bring the next item forward, which is the radar speed sign program. And then we'll kind of go back to the beginning and look at this whole holistic approach. And as I said to Mallory, don't worry, I've got the resolutions, I'll get them. So Rob, if you want to take us through this report. Oh, unmute, Rob.
Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor. My speakers were also muted. So are we on the radar speed program?
Yes, yes. So we're going to do the radar speed program report. Thank you.
Again, so through discussions in certainly this past summer and through budget, the concept of a radar speed sign has come up. Initially in draft 1 and 2 of the budget, staff had put in $5,000 for a traffic counter. And the intent with that was to identify hotspots as identified by staff or counselors or, complaints from the public to actually find out what the vehicles are doing in a particular area. It kind of morphed into a bigger conversation with the radar speed sign, similar to that the county has. So a couple things with the program. We don't have anything that represents this. So anything we do is going to cost money, certainly some capital cost. It's also going to take time. And that's where we really fall down, is we don't have the staff to look after a program such as this. Presumably we could come up with 10 locations easily that we want to keep an eye on. I'm figuring an upset time limit of a day per site. That's potentially 2 weeks of staff time lost to the program itself. Another concern of mine would be vandalism of these signs. It's one thing to have them up in front of Tim Hortons or, down in Minden somewhere, but we have many, many remote areas. And my concern is we put it up there. I'm not going to single out any area, but if we go back to traffic counts, if there's only a traffic count of 3 on a road, it's probably not that busy. If the sign goes missing, we're not going to notice for a few days, it's long gone. So what I'm getting at is I have more questions than answers when it comes to these radar speed signs. I've gone over some of them. The other problem we're going to have is how to identify which sites get the sign. how long does a sign stay there? What is the expected outcome? If it drops the operating speed 20, 30%, is that okay? What if it only drops by 5%? What if it doesn't drop at all? What's our next step after that? I'm worried we're getting ahead of ourselves to some extent by implementing this program, if we move ahead with one, based on the staff resources we have, and we really have no anticipated outcomes or contingencies. And I'd be glad to hear any ideas that people have.
Okay, yep, let's open it up to the floor for questions, comments. Councillor McKechnie, go ahead.
Well, I'm the one who's basically brought this up, and I hate to disagree with you, Rob, but I disagree with you. I believe that radar signs are really a great thing, and I really think they do work. We're definitely not going to put it on a road that has a traffic count of 3. I think you or somebody told me that there's you can have cameras on them for any vandalism, and it can be a pretty serious fine tampering with them. I just think that everybody's so concerned about our cottage roads, whether it's in my ward or in Ward 1 or 2 or wherever, Ward 4, doesn't matter. And I think we got to do something. So I know that I definitely think they're a good thing. And I also think that a lot of our roads don't have any speed limits on them at all. I know my road, Sir Sam's, has one sign. You can't see it. It's behind a tree. And I know that people would like to see a 50-kilometer speed limit along there, but that's another issue, I guess. But I definitely think the radar signs are a thing of the future. That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think they're a good thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKechnie. Anyone else want to comment on that? Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Councillor McKechnie has said. I know from my personal behavior that these signs make a difference. And the fact that I see them in so many different places, reinforces that they must make a difference in terms of slowing traffic down. They don't, issue fines or anything like that. It's not photo radar in terms of somebody gets a ticket in the mail a week later. But it just reminds, people who are absent-minded or whatever, hey, you're going faster than the speed limit. And in fact, I know that the county's experience with it, I can't recall specifically the numbers right now, but it was in the 12 to 15 kilometers per hour that it made a difference in terms of slowing traffic down. And, Greg Douglas there talked about that, how they measured without the flashing light and then measured it once they turned it on, and it literally slowed traffic down that much. That's what we're trying to do here. That's the desired outcome. Slow traffic down. And it's not an issue on every road. As Councillor McKechnie said, it's probably not an issue on a road where there's only 3 cars per day. But, we all know of roads, and I would say there's a stretch of Canisius Lake Road at the top of the lake. It's a problem. Certainly Green Lake Road, I've talked about in the past. Irish Line is a problem. There's a few places around our municipality where this is an issue. Not a problem on Highland Avenue downtown, but you'll find 10, 12 places. Getting those things out there and just there for a few days will slow the traffic down, and people will remember next time they're coming through, I got to go a little slower. Last time I came here, I was going too fast. So that's the outcome. Slower traffic, slow it down. Simple as that. And how we do it, you've raised an interesting approach here in your report with an engineering student. I have sympathy for you in terms of the load on your team. And if that's the way to go, I'd sure be happy to explore a little further in terms of that approach. But it's getting 1 or 2 of these things out in our community and making use of it. A small investment for something that's going to demonstrate we're serious finding ways to slow down traffic. Close that. Thank you.
Okay, I see Councillor Clark next.
Yeah, I really support that idea of the engineering student and them having a piece of equipment. To me, it's collecting up more information on the roads, Rob. The speed part of it's one thing, but it's really as much information as you can collect on your roads helps you manage them. And the idea of having a student also available to be able to do the the checks on the the culverts and all the rest of it, I think it your database of information and enable you to do, better management, better decision making. I think it's a great option. I think. Thank you.
Okay, any other councillors want to weigh in? I know the experience at the county was mixed, actually. While it may have slowed them down while the radar sign was up, I can attest to the 2 locations where it was, one just before Walker's Home Hardware on County Road 21 and just approximately before the Tim Hortons. As soon as that sign's gone, as soon as they're flashing and in front of the school, that sort of all that those 3 sections on County Road 21, they're going just as fast as ever. As soon as the sign is gone, the county had one stolen. They're expensive. And also it continually comes up with county councillors as to, well, what are we doing with the data? Speeding is a police issue. And it was brought forward at one point too. Why don't we could take this money and invest in some hired patrol of OPP, contracted and get them out there and get ticketing. Anyway, that's I'm not sure what we do with the data. And again, how are we going to give broad direction out that somebody thinks Sir Sam's Road it should be on and somebody else says it should be on I don't know where, another road. So that's going to be a bit confusing. Councillor Smith?
Well, just what are we going to do with the data? Once we had the hard evidence to say, I'll use Irish Line as an example. It's posted at, in this case, 60 kilometers. I'm going to use Green Lake Road as a better example because Rob's report there told us that the traffic on Green Lake Road, if I recall, the number was 53 kilometers per hour, a 2-kilometer stretch of road. And by the way, the posted speed limit at both ends, so coming into that stretch of road, both cases is posted at 40. That's speeding. And so put that sign up there, collect the evidence for a 2 or 3 or 4 day period, and then use that as the basis for allocating your cash paid OPP, or frankly, be saying to the OPP, by the way, we had a radar there, and in a 3-day period, there were 127 people speeding. You ought to get out there and set up a radar trap for a few days, because that'll slow the people down permanently once they get a ticket for $100. There you got the evidence. That's what you can use something like this to direct, and then you got if we have to pay for it, presumably we get the revenue from the tickets. It's going to have an impact. And frankly, to me, it's a better result than spending $47,000 on having an engineer survey our roads and tell us how fast people can actually drive safely on them. We need to address the speeding issue where roads are posted and people are just ignoring the signs.
Okay. Alrighty. Deputy Mayor Kennedy and then Councillor McKechnie.
Yeah, I'm sort of torn here because I do support the radar sign, but I think Rob, correct me, did we not purchase a new traffic strips or whatever traffic count that actually shows the average speed limit of the 85th percentile? So we already are collecting data and we're not doing anything with that then as far as forwarding the OPP, or so I'm just wondering, maybe we're already collecting that same data?
Yes, we have. The problem with that data is it was taken on a point on the road determined by somebody else to get an average count for the road section. It wasn't implemented to get the true speeding of cars, albeit some of them did show some speeding. That was evident. But if you have something portable, you can put it where you want it, where the issues truly are.
Okay, and Councillor McKechnie was next.
Thank you. Needless to say, we can just do what we're doing, which is basically nothing about speeding, and there's nothing that we really can do. I mean, we can't educate people. We can talk to them and tell them and put signs up to slow down or the speed limit says. But I think I've talked to a lot of my constituents about this in my ward, and I haven't anybody say to me it's a crazy idea. Well, they don't work. I've heard a lot of positives, and it shows that we are trying to do something. We're showing some concern, and I mean, I know that one in the whole municipality of Dysart's not going to do a lot of good. Such a big, but I think over time, you had one or two for every ward, they'd really accomplish a lot. But that's just my opinion. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So in the resolution, there's some choices. And one is the first is to direct staff to purchase a traffic counter as presented in the 2021 budget. So that's not an additional, it's already included in the budget to have one. But then there's two other choices, which we direct staff to source a third party, or the council directs staff to advertise for an engineering student. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. When I was suggesting third party, I wasn't suggesting an engineering firm. I was suggesting reaching out to the county to see if they could implement it into their program somehow. And just to follow up with the engineering student, it is mentioned in the report that we don't have a vehicle for this student. So there's going to be a second part to that.
Okay. The only thing with the so that's good to point to note, but the only thing with directing staff to source a third party is committing us to that, but we could give direction to, like, what if we direct you to do that and the county says no, then we're sort of stuck there. So perhaps just the first part of the resolution, which is to purchase traffic counter as presented in the budget, and then to give verbal direction that if there's an opportunity to work with the county. I just don't want to be held in the resolution that it says we direct you to do that. Mallory, what do you think, or Rob, on that?
Yeah, we can, if you just want to, the first line there, just acknowledge and receive the report. I can do a bit of background work on my part and I can bring something back at the end of the month.
Right, so we are including it in our budget as we've already presented, but you can have a verbal with the county, and if they're able to do it, great. I just didn't want it, then it's sort of hard set in stone if we've directed you to source a third party. And we'll have to give, I guess, we'll have to look for the hot spots of where we've had complaints, Wigmog Road and Irish Line and Sir Sam's, and we can think of anything else. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so going back to the speed limit review that we did not follow through with or choose to accept. So there was $47,000 in there from the reserve. So should that $47,000 be put back in as a placeholder for this program?
I'm not sure. We just decided to, we decided not to do the traffic study and just kept it in reserve. So,
because I'm just thinking the 47 grand, no matter how we choose to fund this, if we get the engineering student, it could come out of that development reserve.
We had a student one year in the planning department. I don't know, Tamara, if you can recall, how was she funded?
That was probably, I think that was actually through one of the Canada employment programs, summer students. But they are a lot of work for those grants too, for what you get back on it. I think Barbara can attest to that.
Yeah, and also, like, I know that there are some internships or placements, but then, as Rob just pointed out, you're putting we don't have a vehicle, and we're still going to be in COVID this year, so I hesitate this year to do that. I see support for a radar sign, and let's put one. We've got one in the budget. Let's keep it in the budget, and let's see how effective it is, and see what we do with that. Mallory?
This resolution mentions a traffic counter. Rob, is that the same thing as a radar sign? No. Okay, so is it actually in the budget?
Thank you for that correction. Rob?
No, they are separate things. So we could just change out the terminology, replace traffic counter with speed radar sign.
Okay, so pardon me for not reading the resolution correctly. I just, Barbara, if you can go, did we not have a radar sign in our budget already? I thought we had one in there. No, we did not.
So we do have money in the budget for a network traffic count, 10,000 that we put in from our first draft discussion.
That's for Ward 1 to finish the traffic count. Okay, so let's get the correct item in. Councillor Smith.
It says in this, the final line of this report here, $5,000 is included in the 2021 draft budget for purchasing a traffic counter. So I think that the approach of just telling staff, well, we don't want you to buy a traffic counter. We want you to buy a flashing speeding sign we're talking about. And I believe from county experience, they're also about $5,000.
Yes. Okay, so we would change the resolution to not say the word traffic counter, but to say a, what's the official term? A flashing thingy-dingy. What? Valerie, go ahead.
We could change the second line here to say that we direct staff to purchase a speed radar sign with the monies allotted for a traffic counter as presented in the 2021 budget. So it just replaces one with the other.
Okay, so if
we want to take that item out, but so that's Rob, I don't know if you have any more insight into that or.
No, that's fine. It's a terminology thing. I know.
Okay, so just for my own clarification, are we putting the traffic counter and the radar sign in? No, just the radar sign. Okay. Deputy Mayor Kennedy and then Councillor Smith.
I thought the traffic counter was an important tool for you going forward, Rob, to make further determination. So I'm supportive of buying both and taking the money from the 47,000 that we're not spending on the speed limit review.
Yeah, well,
put you in that spot.
Well, this year I'm hoping to get Ward 1 counted. You know, we get some speeds on that. Our data's pretty current, quite honestly. It's only a year old. It would be helpful for me to get my head wrapped around this thing in year 2021 and maybe look at expanding or changing what we do in 2022.
Yeah, good point. So for this year, we would just be purchasing one portable radar sign with no other further direction. Rob, Councillor Smith, I know you had your hand up, but I'm going to hear from Rob.
Yeah, and just to follow up, you can probably get the same data out of the radar sign that you can out of the tubes. I'm pretty sure you can. I'm just not 100%.
Councillor Smith, did you want to add to that?
I just, you know, a kind of an observation and a question here, but we've got 1.54 million in our working fund right now. And Barbara has us adding about $250,000 to that working fund reserve with the, not the transportation surplus, but the other surplus funds from out of the 546 or whatever it was from 2020. So about $1.8 million in a working fund reserve. We've got a development fund reserve that we've decided not to move all 300,000 into, but there's a development fund reserve there. And Rob was going to be able to pull $47,000 out of a fund here to do this speed study that he was advocating for. It seems to me, and this is a question for Barbara or Rob, if Rob comes along partway through 2021 and says, you know, I got a great idea here and I need a speed counter for $5,000, or I want to get another one of these speed radar you know, things, or a traffic counter, or whatever, you know, it's for $5,000. If we're going to have millions of dollars in a traffic, or sorry, in these reserve funds, and we can't extract $5,000 or $10,000 to buy a piece of equipment, like, what's wrong with our reserves that they're so restricted?
Nothing, except that there are targets, and we talked about that all later. I just want to correct something that you said, that Rob was advocating for the speed study. Rob was given direction by council to bring that back. He didn't advocate for anything. We said, bring us this back. He brought it back. We said, no, we're not going to do it. So just to not throw staff under the bus there, we advocated for it, and then we changed our mind, which we are allowed to do.
It wasn't my intention to throw him under the bus. It was a recommendation that he brought forward, maybe because we asked him to, but
yeah,
you know,
that's all. Just clarification for Rob.
If Rob felt I threw him under the bus, I apologize. Oh, no. It was a small bus, Rob.
A little, yeah, and it wasn't going very fast. So Barbara and I talked just at the break about her bringing a report back to with reserves and to, you know, I don't know if we want to do comparisons to other municipalities or if we do targets or where we're at or what provincial percentages are recommended, etc. So I think that'll be a further discussion. Barbara, if you want to comment on just general ideas of reserves.
Yes, so the idea here is to establish a reserve and reserve fund policy, and that would basically lay out the framework on how money is transferred into the reserves and how money is drawn from the reserves. Just gives it a little bit more substance and rules of engagement.
And what those targets should be. We talked about and what those levels should be, like, you know, as an example, in any reserve that we have, so that, and whether it be based on a dollar figure or more likely a percentage or something like that, so that you say, oh, we're only at 40% of the target we need to get to, you know, or wherever we're supposed to get to. So having the policies and having the targets. Mallory, I'm going to get you to help because the resolution I have in front of me is not going to pass as written. So if you want to read a resolution on this radar sign, I will then ask for a mover and a seconder on that one.
I would love to, but I'm still confused on where we landed. So I'm gonna pull out. I had one in where we replaced the traffic counter with a radar speed sign, but I'm hearing that maybe we don't want to do that. Do we just want to direct staff to purchase a radar speed sign and leave it at that? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to. Okay. So be it resolved that council acknowledge and receive this report as information and that council directs staff to purchase a radar speed sign. How about that?
Barbara?
Barbara's got a question.
So I just need clarification on where this will land in the 2021 budget. The impact is saying the 5,000 is included in the 2021 budget, and maybe question for Rob. Is that in the existing budget now, or we're going to add that in?
It's in the existing budget now.
Okay.
And I believe it was funded through the levy.
Okay, thank you.
So if that is the case, is a resolution necessary?
It's under Appendix A.
Pardon me?
Sorry, I just letting Barbara know it's in Appendix A.
Tamara, is a resolution necessary if it's included in the budget?
Well, the money's there, but isn't it there now as a traffic counter versus a radar sign? I think that's just the difference, isn't it?
Okay, so then the resolution needs to read as included in the 2021 budget. Okay. Councillor Smith?
Could we add a third part, if you like, to the resolution and staff to report back on you know, the approaches to utilizing this thing, because whether it's going to be done by you may check with the county and they may say no, so maybe he needs to come back and flesh out this engineering student. I don't know, but he's going to have to investigate. We don't want him to buy the speeding sign. We want him to deploy it, and he needs some resource to do that. So he's going to have to report back to us on what the options there are.
Okay. So it's for the sake of a budget purpose, we can add that to the resolution, but it won't affect the budget. So I'm going to go back to Mallory because she's typing in a resolution as we speak. So if Mallory can read the resolution, then I'll look for a mover and a seconder.
Okay. Be it resolved that council acknowledge and receive information and that council directs staff to purchase a radar speed sign. Do we want to put something about the budget in there, Barbara?
As included in the 2021 budget.
As included in the 21 one. As included in the 2021 budget, and the staff will report back on how the radar speed sign will be used. Is what I put as the final word.
Yes. Is that okay, Rob? All right. So that was read. We got it. Took a while to get there, but I'm going to look.
Mara has another question.
Sorry, not wanting to complicate this at all, But to John or Councillor Smith's point, if we end up having to have a summer student based on Rob's recommendation and there's those costs, should we identify an amount right now for Barbara so that we know if something's gonna be funded from those reserves or so forth?
I think if it's out of reserves, we don't need to make that decision today. We're just trying to get to a levy percentage. But if he determines that the only way to do it is, but it could be through a third party, it could be through the county. So that was it. So I think we're okay with, as the resolution was read, for the purpose of a budget meeting. And so with that said, I'm going to now look for the mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Smith. All in favor? And that carries. Okay, so that is, I'm just going to put a line through that one because we changed it. So let's see where we're at in our day. I think we need to go back to the overall discussion. This would be the appropriate time to go back and discuss the proposal that's still waiting on the floor to take the $225,000 and allocate them to, I'm not sure what we'd allocate it to, but not transferring those to reserves, but allocating it to the transportation budget, Barbara, or would we consider just specifically to road capital construction, or how would we word that as the proposals on the floor? Go ahead, Barbara.
So I would recommend that the 225,000, if that's the number, be transferred into the development reserve for use of future capital roads works projects.
Okay, so I did see some consensus for the 225, but even on the break, I do caution that if we're not putting anything into reserves, it might bite us. It might bite a future council. We don't know. There could be a compromise to put a different amount. We could find that it's not an all or nothing, but maybe somewhere in the middle, and that we don't transfer. As an example, we could say 35,000 to each of those reserves as identified, and the remaining 40,000. So that's now 120,000 be transferred to capital. So it's just a bit of a shell game, playing with the numbers, but wanting to see what other, if it's the support is for the full 225, then that's either way. It's going to a reserve with, and we know what we want to do with it. Councillor Clark.
Yeah. What Barbara suggested, putting it into the development fund would be perfect. And if we don't spend it, then it gets moved back into reserves. It's a win-win.
It is in a reserve, but it's an unrestricted, whereas the other proposal was there, if you will, sort of restricted funds. It's allocating, this is for this is for that, whereas the other is more a broad sense. And then when we get our road tenders back, we will see if we can bring some roads forward. So is there support for Councillor Smith's change, which would be on the resolution that talks about the transfers to reserves? Councillor Smith, do you want to move that at this time? Or is there any more, whatever is conversation? Councillor Wood Roberts?
I actually would prefer to put something into each of those reserve accounts. I just think it's the safer thing to do at this point in time, till we get some of those numbers back about costs for construction.
So, okay. Anyone else want to comment on that? Or do you want to further comment and have an actual dollar suggestion?
Even 50% of each going into the specific reserve accounts.
Okay. Councillor Smith, did I see your hand back up?
Well, you were asking somebody to move something, so I was going to move my original, but I'll react to your comment in terms of, trying to find a different approach. Let's remember that we've added $250,000 to our working fund reserve coming out of 2020. This 300,000 we're talking about here is in addition to that. So it's not like our reserves aren't still going up, even if we take this full 225 and allocate it to transportation. The surplus from 2020 was much larger, and so I think there's already balance in the proposal that was put forward. And as Deputy Mayor Kennedy has pointed out, the base budget has funds going into reserves for various activities, including washouts and snow plowing, sanding. So I think the proposal, as I put it forward, is already a modest one. A more aggressive individual, frankly, even myself, if I thought I could have sold it, would have started in a different position. But I was trying to be reasonable, and still believe it's a very reasonable approach. Thank you.
I think that's a great way to come at it. Thank you, Councillor Smith. And it is, none of us are trying to throw crazy things out there. So I believe you would move that. So the resolution would then read, and we're into the one where it's the, it's under item B. So you can read that resolution along in your package. Excuse me. That we're acknowledging the receipt of the revenue and expenditure report, and the council acknowledges the 2020 project amounts. But in that last line, it says, and further, the council directs staff to transfer 300,000 from the maintenance budget surplus to development reserve. So
the 75,000 of it, of the 300,000, was 75,000 of it directed to the washout reserves, and the balance of 225 targeted for road improvements in 2021.
Mallory, are you able to capture that? And is that the correct terminology for that changing of the last little bit of the resolution?
Sorry, I'm typing as we go.
I know it's hard to do in the.
I'm able to capture it, yes. So 75,000 going into a washout reserve, 225 going into development reserve for use in future road projects is what Barbara suggested for wording.
2021.
2021
right.
road projects. Yeah.
John doesn't want to get this pushed down the road.
You don't want future?
Words. No, future is. He wants.
Future is too far away. I'm into 2021.
Okay, I'll make sure it says that.
Deputy Mayor Kennedy.
Just going to second that motion.
Okay. Is everyone clear? Do I need to read it again to be maybe, or have the clerk right from the start just for clarification and everybody's really comfortable? We have the mover and the seconder. Mallory, if I could get you to read the resolution, and I'll call.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not muted. Okay. Be it resolved that council acknowledges receipt of the revenue and expenditure report as of December 31st, 2020, with the 2020 forecast analysis, and further that council acknowledges the 2020 project amounts transferred to development reserve and the amount of 313,000, and that council further directs staff to transfer 225,000 from the development reserve for use in the 2021 road projects. I'm not saying that right. I've really not typed it right. From the 21, okay, so I'm going to redo it. Further, that council directs staff to transfer 225,000 from the 2020 maintenance budget surplus to the development reserve for use in 2021 roads projects, and that 75,000 will be transferred for, what was that for? Roadside washouts. That's a wicked one. I will clean it up.
It's the washouts reserve. It's the 75,000.
Yeah. And I apologize for putting you on the spot. I could have talked about the weather or something while you type that. I can't type and talk at the same time. Well, sort of, I can, but it doesn't work out. So if the councillors are comfortable, I have moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Deputy Mayor Kennedy. I will call for the vote. All in favor? And that carries. So that resolution is done, which takes us back to actually the first resolution. And why I held that off, because we have not changed the levy increase, which is at 1.16%. Is there any further discussion on that? And if not, I will read that resolution, which gives staff direction to bring back the bylaw for the levy. So is there any further discussion? If not, I will take a mover and a seconder, and that's on the one that finalizes the municipal levy. Councillor Smith?
I just wanted to make sure everybody understands one point here.
Yes.
I talked about $250,000 being available for roads, and that was the 225 plus a sense that a portion of the $50,000 that's in this 1.16 for brushing won't actually be necessary. As Rob outlined earlier, he's got, I think it was 130 some in the base budget for 2021 already for brushing. And, that's not quite enough to do work on the backlog and the 7-year program that we're supportive of. But he doesn't need all $50,000 for the, 7-year program that we're talking about. So I'm looking for him as he gets into the detail of this and starts going through the requirements in terms of ditching and so forth, be able to use part of that $50,000 for brushing to kind of get everything he needs, and have some left over for ditching or other, roads improvements to get the 225 up to a full 250. That's the concept there anyway. Rob, I see you nodding a couple of times. Does that make sense to you?
Go ahead, Rob.
I think so. I think I'm with you.
I think it's because it's in another reserve. I'm not sure through Barbara if we would have to have that as by resolution, or that I'm not sure. And I do see she's writing away. So I'll just go to Deputy Mayor Kennedy, and then I'll ask you, Barbara, if that needs to be by resolution. Go ahead.
Yeah, since that is a levy increase, I'm wondering if brushing is, as Councillor Smith says, is too strict. If we just say for public works use, or something a little broader that gives us some more flexibility as we go along. And Rob, we've given Rob a huge amount of stuff here to come back with. I'd like to ensure he's got enough flexibility that we keep that 50,000. It is a tax levy, but I'm okay with that. But I'd be a little more flexible than just brushing. I'm wondering, I don't know how we word that, or if that's a possibility.
So I'm just going to turn to Barbara as we have thank you, Barbara. Go ahead. Unmute. Don't forget to unmute. I know she's typing and writing and.
Yeah, so if the intention of the $50,000 that we have in the current budget classified under brushing is to be given some flexibility as far as roads projects, I'm thinking those roads projects would be expanded to other maintenance activities, such as ditching.
So do we need any resolution, or is there flexibility when as the year goes on with Rob? Like, do you need anything from council today to change that, or does Rob have no? So I don't think we actually need, I didn't think so, but we have enough flexibility that some years you're overspent here and underspent there. It's just a general amount. Is that fair enough, Rob? You want to comment? Yes. So we don't need further resolution. What we'd be doing right now in this resolution, it says that we acknowledge receipt of the revenue and expenditure report for 2021 budget, third draft for information, and further that council direct staff on the 2021 budget amendments to finalize the municipal levy rate. So that is the resolution on the floor. I'll ask for a mover and seconder then. Councillor Clark, Councillor Wood Roberts. And are we all in favor? Passed unanimously. So Barbara, that is, you got your work to do. There's a couple other resolutions that were included that were for receiving, and that it is be resolved that the council acknowledge receipt of the report on the state of roadside brushing as information. I don't know if you wanted to add and further that, because we did give you direction. Rob?
No, I don't think I need further direction. As long as there's a budget number, I can tender accordingly.
Okay, okay, so we'll leave the resolution, it just says as information. A mover seconder on that, please. Councillor Smith, Councillor Clark. Be it resolved, the council acknowledge receipt of the report on the state of roadside brushing as information. All in favor? And that carries. And the last resolution before we near to adjourn is that be it resolved that council receive the gravel road to hardtop report as information. Mover seconder, Councillor Wood Roberts, Deputy Mayor Kennedy. All in favor? Okay, and that carries. I don't know why I said June, obviously way before then. We'll need a report. I just meant not next meeting. And basically it's a bylaw to confirm. I don't think there's anything else for today. At this point, before we confirm the proceedings of today, while we put Rob on the hot seat again, it is our biggest expenditure that we have control over. It is where we're really trying to put tax dollars and use them well and wisely. So I appreciate you getting to a third draft and having the conversation. I don't know about the rest of you councillors, but I feel that we're really, really making progress here at Dysart, and very, very proud of the budget as it's today. And so all the other heads of departments that are not on the screen today, we thank them and thank Barbara for all her time and effort. This is a process that starts as soon as one finishes. It's clap clap. It's as soon as one finishes, the wheels begin for the next year, and it begins in earnest by around September. So it's a very lengthy process, but it's the most important thing we do, and really, really proud. So mover seconder to confirm proceedings. Councillor Clark, I see Tamara, but it's Councillor Donaldson. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2021-06, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting held on February 12th, 2021, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and the corporate seal attached hereto. All in favor? That's passed. And lastly, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Donaldson and Councillor McKechnie. Be it resolved that council adjourn its special meeting held on February 12th, 2021 at 11:26 a.m. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the councillors, for all your effort and conversation and positive comments and willingness to compromise and work together. It's great. Reminder that we have another meeting. February seems to be a busy month, but this is an important one for our service delivery review. And Tamara and I are meeting this afternoon to go over, so we sort of know how we're going to guide the meeting and figure that out. So have a safe afternoon and a great weekend. Keep warm. It's going to be a frosty one. So take care. Thanks, everybody.